I'm confused as to whether Amy Schumer is making like thoughtful social commentary or she's just a mean girl, because there's some element of like making fun of people who are pregnant. Hey, and welcome to Trash Pickins, where we pick apart the most disgusting, fetid, over-the-top, cringe-worthy media trash that we all love to watch and love to hate. Today we're going to be talking about Kinda Pregnant, which is a film that's on Netflix 2025 with Amy Schumer. We thought that this was a fabulous trash piece because it's actually the classic story that you might see from some of the holiday films that we love to pick apart, but this time we get to see it randomly in March or February, whenever it came out. So stick around with us today as we pick apart Kinda Pregnant. I'm Lisa.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Frank.
Let's get picking. So Kinda Pregnant is a raunchy rom-com where the main character, Lainey, decides that she only wants to be pregnant and have a family in life since she was a child. However, when the movie starts, we see that unfortunately her dreams have become crushed because her partner wants to leave her for a threesome and her best friend gets pregnant instead of her. So the rest of the film is effectively Lainey, Amy Schumer's character, wearing a baby bump, pretending that she's pregnant to get all of the benefits of what pregnant women do and also go through the struggles that they go through. And then in the end, of course, she has to give up her ruse and she shows that she is actually not pregnant. She ends up just loving herself before she can love someone else. So I guess that is, that's Kinda Pregnant in a nutshell. So before we dive into talking about Kinda Pregnant, we have to sort of just talk about Amy Schumer a little bit. Obviously, she has had some not great press recently. She came out as saying some things that folks were finding problematic about the Palestine-Israel conflict. We are not going to comment on that, but we do want to at least acknowledge that that's something that's gone on. So if you're curious about that, there's a whole lot that you can look up on your own. But besides that, Amy Schumer's been around doing comedy for a long time, at least 10 years, and she's been known as actually pretty feminist and very different in her comedic approach and style, which we see sort of on full display in this film. All right, so what were your initial impressions of Kinda Pregnant?
Kinda Pregnant is a movie you've seen 100 times before, except it's about pregnancy this time.
Yeah, it's definitely trashy, but it's not as enraging as other trashy movies I've watched.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty vapid, predictable film, interspersed with really raunchy, kind of gross humor, but it feels quite empty and doesn't really deliver much of an emotional payoff. All right, so Sarah, before we can break down this film, tell us, what is it about? What's the scene by scene?
Yeah, I have like a short overview. It doesn't go into every scene, but it gives you the gist of the film. Okay, first scene. Lainey and her best friend Kate are children and they're playing make-believe with dolls giving birth. And I know this is like a tiny scene, but it kind of sets the stage to let you know this is all about best friends who are obsessed with having children. That's just the premise of the film. 30 years later, they're still best friends. Lainey is in a committed relationship with her boyfriend and she's expecting him to propose to her. Kate is already married and she just discovers she's pregnant. Lainey goes to dinner with her boyfriend, again expecting a proposal, but instead he reveals to her that he's polyamorous and he wants to turn their relationship into a throuple. Lainey is outraged by this and she kind of dramatically breaks up with him and it's meant to be funny. Then later, Lainey gets lunch with her best friend Kate, who reveals that she's pregnant.
I'm sort of pregnant. And
instead of being a supportive best friend, Lainey is super angry and super jealous and tells her to get an abortion, and it's supposed to be funny. Lainey then goes to a coffee shop and she runs into a man. There's a random chance encounter and her and this man have great chemistry, but nothing comes of it.
I'm your down-to-earth love interest.
Later on, Lainey tries to be supportive of her best friend Kate for her pregnancy, but she's so overwhelmed with her feelings of jealousy that she decides to buy a fake pregnancy belly and she pretends to be pregnant in public. And doing this starts to make her feel good about herself. Through all of this, she comes to the idea that she should go to pregnant women yoga classes. And when she's attending these yoga classes, she meets a new pregnant friend named Megan. The two of them bond over the woes of pregnancy, although Lainey is lying about being pregnant. Obviously, Megan doesn't know this, and the two of them become good friends. And then ironically, Megan's brother is the man that she crossed paths with at the coffee shop. So naturally, they just start dating because they all just know each other. Lainey is now living two lives, one where her friends think she's pregnant and one where her other group of friends think she's not pregnant. And she kind of struggles to keep these worlds separate, and that's where all the humor comes from in the film. As Lainey is living her double life as a pregnant woman, this causes her to neglect her friendship with Kate, and she doesn't really show up for Kate through Kate's actual pregnancy, and they sort of have a best friend breakup. Lainey continues to date Josh, and they start to fall in love, but she starts to feel guilty that she is lying to him about being pregnant, so she ends up breaking it off with him and never revealing the truth to him and leaving him confused. And then the movie ends with Kate's baby shower, where all the people that Lainey is friends with, the people who think she's pregnant and the people who think she's not pregnant, they all just end up there for some reason. And it's a silly scene where she has to like stuff a turkey in her dress and take the turkey out and, you know, play both roles in the same room. But obviously she can't do it, and she has to come clean and make a speech to everybody at the party that she's been faking her pregnancy. And of course, everyone is angry at her, but then immediately, like within 45 seconds of the film, they all forgive her for being a psychopath, and Kate comes to her and says, "Let's be friends again, I miss you." And Josh says, "Yeah, I'll do crazy things for love. Let's date, I don't care." And then she learns to love herself, and happily ever after. The end.
That was a great recap. All right, so what we're going to do is go through some themes and things that really stood out to us in watching this film. We got a whole list, so let's dive in. The first that we wanted to discuss is really just the whole, like, the trope of the secret identity. This whole film has basically Lainey trying to pretend that she's pregnant and doing whatever she can to hide the fact that it's just a soft fake belly. She has to, like, be pregnant and then not pregnant, and then, you know, all the, like, zaniness ensues. But we've seen this trope, the secret identity trope, all over. Like, it's so classic, right? Mrs. Doubtfire in '93 with Robin Williams. Labor Pains, another film where Lindsay Lohan from 2009 decides that she wants to pretend that she's pregnant to save her marriage. Then, of course, you have the Parent Trap films in Freaky Friday, again with Lindsay Lohan. She seems to like these sort of types of films.
Isn't like The Nutty Professor the same thing too? Like, he's a smart guy and then I don't remember. But there's just like, you know, it's like what is the thing you're transforming into that you're faking, and then the thing you're coming out of, and this time it's pregnancy.
Yeah, I found some interesting write-ups online from this blog from First Draft Pro. It says that
the secret identity trope involves a character who lives a double life, concealing their true identity, often to protect themselves or others, or to carry out specific missions or tasks. This hidden identity can range from superheroes disguising themselves as ordinary citizens to spies, vigilantes, or even characters hiding their past or their lineage. At its core, the secret identity trope explores themes of privacy, the nature of self, duality, and the consequences of leading a double life. They highlight the psychological and emotional impact of maintaining a facade.
Which, I guess if you're being charitable, that's what the film is about, but it's like really too silly and goofy for that. Honestly, it doesn't really get to that depth.
Like whatever, it's a trope and it's predictable and it's like a thing we see, but it's kind of like, I don't even want to be critical of it because it's like they clearly set out to do that. So it's almost like why criticize them for choosing to do, if you want to choose to do that, like they're clearly aware of it too, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, it is what it is,
Yeah, just something to acknowledge. The other one, and this is like a big one, is basically, I just want to be a mom theme or trope, right? All she wants to do is be pregnant and have a family, nothing else. That sort of suffuses the entire film.
It's sort of like in the Christmas movies where it's like,
all I want is to find true love.
There's that quest for some kind of fulfillment.
It feels like really low-hanging fruit because it's sort of like something in our culture where everybody's always like, oh, if you're a woman, your clock is ticking. Are you going to find so-and-so? Sadly, that's something that women face these types of questions all the time. So it's sort of like easy content. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but because it's so one note, it kind of can feel a little bit weird because it's all about pregnancy all the time. And if you're not all about that, it's like, there's not much else the film's about. So,
Amy Schumer is interesting because, like, I don't know if she's outwardly identifies herself as I'm a feminist voice, or if she's just like a woman in comedy who is doing the raunchy thing like other comedians and just happens to be a woman. I should have looked that up. But I feel conflicted about it because she chooses to represent women in ways that are technically empowering. right? So she was in that movie Trainwreck. I've never seen it, but I feel like the title of it, to me, like encapsulates the sort of archetype that she represents in movies and maybe just in culture, where it's like a woman who's not quite perfect for what we expect, like a little too chubby, a little too loud, a little too raunchy, a little too farty, like just things that like are natural for women to do, right? And that's her thing, is she's saying all women fart, you know, we're just not supposed to show it. I'm gonna take one for the team. I'm gonna make a movie where I'm farting and embarrass myself, but it's for women, right? And so I think that's why a lot of people liked her at the beginning, because you're like, yeah, women are raunchy, women, you know, they're not all perfectly pious, whatever, you know what I mean? But that's why this movie really confused me, because the role that women played were baby obsessed, and that's actually like kind of a stereotype put on women. And I was like, I was a little confused about where the empowerment was in this, like the way that the husbands act. The husbands were all so stupid that it wasn't even like a good critique. Women will frequently say, I feel like I'm raising my child alone and the man isn't involved. And that is a thing that our society deals with. But it didn't really feel like that's what she was talking about. She just made men dumb for no reason other than making fun of them, which again feels like a little harmful. Like saying women are baby obsessed also feels like a little harmful. I didn't know if it was supposed to be a joke. Like I didn't quite understand what she was doing here.
I think for me, I'm confused as to whether Amy Schumer is making like thoughtful social commentary or she's just a mean girl. Because I think that overall, like she's making fun of pregnancy culture. Frank and I were talking about this. Like she's critical of pregnancy culture, makes fun of the yoga or the prenatal depression stuff, or having dry caked nipples and just doing stuff like rubbing it on your nipples in the middle of the street because it's just so painful. Obviously she's being silly, but there's some element of like making fun of people who are pregnant and what it must be like for them, and also the like weird precious culture around it as she appears to like perceive it as. And so I don't know that it's meant to be thoughtful in any way. I kind of just feel like she's like, yeah, being pregnant was like sucked and it was tough, or I want to do a piece about it, and this is it. I think that I am confused about Lainey's character because I'm not entirely sure whether we're supposed to like, yeah, be like, it's like upholding the value of having a child, or it's her like kind of making fun of somebody who that's all they want. So to me, it was like not clear.
I agree. It was definitely. I was very confused if they were empowering women about this with pregnancy, or if they were making fun of it, or if it was like the whole culture around pregnancy is ridiculous. It did leave me wondering exactly what the point was.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it. It was vacillating between seemingly commentary and then just like jokes at the expense of these people, like too much that it was hard to tell the difference. And I think I agree with you, Lisa. I'm not sure how much of it was intentional. It might just be she had a baby, so she wants to do this. Saying, let's make a movie about women's experiences and like the gross stuff about pregnancy, the things we don't want to talk about. Like, yeah, that's great. Like, I loved that scene between her and Megan in the bathroom. It was a serious scene where Megan was saying that childbirth was traumatic and I felt like I almost died. And I'm like, that is good. That's the stuff that we want to hear that happens to women. You know what I mean? So I was like, that's a great scene. But then like maybe the yoga scene where they're like all farting or something, like it's silly, but at the same time, this is like what people do to actually make fun of women in a harmful way sometimes. And I just like, I didn't know how to balance those two things in my head. I was confused.
Felt like she just wrote a lot of her stand-up material into this movie and then like had some slapstick moments in there and made it all about pregnancy. The more we talk about it, the more I think that it wasn't really meant to be social commentary. It's just meant to be like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if this happened? Like it's that kind of a creation of the story rather than a thoughtful idea fleshed out and made into like a cohesive plot. And I feel like we're looking at Amy Schumer, and because it's pregnancy and it's this emotional, very significant topic, and we're kind of trying to read into it a little bit and like hoping for her to do something that I don't think she ever really set out to do with this movie.
I think you said that well, Frank. And I think that because that like she is a loud woman who is reminding people that women can be more than just thin and quiet. I don't know. She's not my favorite, but I was like, I acknowledge what she's done in comedy, in film, and whatnot. And I kind of feel like I held her to a higher standard, and I felt a little let down. I was like, oh great, something about pregnancy. She's gonna make some thoughtful statements. And other than that scene in the bathroom, I didn't really feel like there was like a huge win for pregnant women after watching this. And I don't know why I thought it was gonna be better than that.
Well, I was going to say that this is a Adam Sandler production, so we are not going to have to expect very much, right? It's sort of just like goofy that happens.
Well, on this note, I don't remember if this is one of the themes you have, but can we transition to another theme, but like in the same idea? Can we talk about potential fat shaming in the film? I was curious to hear your guys' opinion about that because, a big thing that she's talked very openly about was, losing weight in her career and gaining it and having all this pressure from her managers and whatever. Like, that's a big thing for her, which, clearly she's like, I don't care. I'm gonna be me. I think she also has some sort of health issue as well or something. Yeah, yeah, so I mean, but either way, a big part of it is like, body positivity, body acceptance, and that's always been like part of her shtick. But knowing that about her, I was a little confused about some of the jokes being made about like the body size, and she was making them about her own body, so she's very self-aware. But like one of them, for example, was when she was getting coffee at the Starbucks. There's the barista is reading out people's names to say, come get your coffee. And she's like, oh, no, don't read mine. Because, when he reads it, he reveals that she just basically got a cup of whipped cream. And it's embarrassing because that's like a fat girl drink. And I was like, I just didn't understand. I was like, wait, I don't know if that's like funny commentary about fat people or you're just saying fat people like eating whipped cream. Like, I don't know. Again, I was like, is this thoughtful commentary or are you just being mean? I know you're talking about your own body. It was very confusing to me.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say to me is like, I didn't see a lot of instances of that in this film overall. Like that was a moment that I remember. I actually don't remember others if there are. Overall, that was her shtick in the past. So like Frank and I went back and rewatched some of her older stand-up comedy from like 2015. And it was like all about that. Like she was joking about EDs and like how she wanted one and like, all this stuff about not eating. And it was like really icky. So it's like actually really triggering content to watch if you are prone to that type of thing. Anyway, so it's like, it was so in your face years ago when she was doing that type of stand-up. I'm not surprised that like an element of it like continued into her work today, but it was nowhere near as in your face as what she was doing like 10 years ago. But it's probably just part of her thing, right? So I wouldn't be surprised. That said, I actually thought that it was like pretty positive that there were people of all different sizes in the show and that there was no commentary necessarily made about all of them and they were wearing different things and they looked like different ways, and I felt that to actually be pretty cool and that there was not a ton of self-consciousness even with her getting with that other guy other than the fact that she had a fake baby bump. So it's sort of a mixed bag for me in this arena, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lisa. I appreciated that there was diversity in the casting as well, and I felt like that probably tied into the themes that she carries and the body positivity things, because it was noticeable at the beginning, and I was like, oh, I'm surprised that these are like the lead characters that we're going with, but it made sense. And
yeah, all of this in general makes me think of just like to step back even further from this film, this idea that comedy has like a huge foundation in like making jokes about people at their expense, and it's meant to be funny. Everyone's like, when can we make jokes about the Holocaust, right? That's like a thing everyone says. And like, to be honest, like I don't really know, like, the philosophy behind that idea. Like, yeah, you want to have, like, a good spirit about it. You don't want to take yourself too seriously. Like, self-effacing jokes are a form of coping, which can be helpful. But sometimes comedy is vicious about it, and I don't know... I don't know if it's helpful or hurtful sometimes. I can't tell.
I think comedians struggle with that. They test material to see if people are ready to hear jokes on recent events and things like that. And some of them... do it on purpose. They dive right in because that's their brand, So it's not a question I think we can answer. It's they do it all the time. They're always looking at it.
Yeah, okay. There's another thing that I wanted to talk about like I feel like it has to do with the whole arc of the movie, which was like really annoying to me. So basically, at the end of the film, she tries to win back Josh, her love interest, when she finally realizes that, she has to just come clean and then apologize for pretending to be pregnant. And she tries to go for Josh. Josh is just not having it. So she goes about her life. And it seems like almost like a year passes or something. I don't know, several months, because there's all this like montage of her growing and changing. But she basically has a bell hooks quote. She says, "Learning to love our female selves is where our search for love must begin." And then in that moment, the Zamboni appears in the street and there's Josh to take her back. And like, that literally is the reification of what we hear in pop culture all the time, which is like, you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. It was a Pinterest quote or whatever.
If you can't love yourself, how in the hell you gonna love somebody else?
Which I hate, right? Where it's sort of like, you just hear it as like something everybody says, pop psychology, and whether or not it's true, nobody really interrogates. And they literally made the arc of the film about that, which just drove me crazy. So just had to throw that in there too.
I felt similarly. People usually have a tendency when you're unhappy with yourself to project that on other people. That is generally true of psychology. However, the thing you're talking about, Lisa, as like, I don't know, a weird dogmatic statement, and like, I don't know.
It was almost chosen randomly to wrap up the film because we never see her self-reflect earlier on. We never see anybody reflect to her that she is self-hating, that there's something problematic about her wanting a family or wanting kids. Everybody just affirms that and validates that the entire film. And then in the last 5 minutes of the film, we realize that the only way she's going to, quote, get the guy is if she accepts herself. And it was like, but are you saying that it was problematic to have those wants and that was preventing you from getting the guy? So it's just it just seems like a random haphazard way to end the film, and not consistent with how they built the character. It just drove me crazy.
I think what they were going for, and again, I don't think it was executed incredibly clearly, but I think the idea is taking Amy Schumer's the role she brings as a female in movies is kind of like, I am not the perfect woman. I'm 40 years old. I just got broken up with. I'm not married yet. I don't have kids yet. I'm a failure, right? That's how her character was supposed to be feeling. I think it's, even though it comes across like I have a desire to want a family and kids, that's how we identify her because that's all she expressed. I think what they weren't trying to critique that, even though it came across that way. They were critiquing, or they were talking about how she feels like a failure as a woman, and it's okay to be a little chubby. It's okay to not meet all these milestones, and you have to learn to accept that women can fit into that box as well. And once you're okay with that, then everything else will be okay, which generally is a positive message. I just think that, like you said, Lisa, it wasn't clear, and for some reason it felt like they were being critical of her desire to have a family versus her internalized misogyny that the character was supposed to have,
We didn't learn anything. She didn't learn anything. We didn't learn anything.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to return to, because Sarah, you mentioned it briefly, but I thought it was probably worth unpacking a little bit more, is the man-hating that happens in this film, or making fun of men, right? So just a few quickly, there's Meg's husband, Steve, who's the male ditz, and then there's Kate's husband, Mark, who's always on his phone, and he's distracted, and she's talking to him, and he's answering something else completely. He's just checked out. There's just Dave and his lust for women, and he's into this sort of polyamorous life. So those are at least three we can start with, but just curious what your impressions are of all that. How does that settle in the film?
I wanted to hear Frank's opinion about this because I was they hated men in this film so much.
I didn't really care, honestly. It was I loved the scene with Meg's husband where the belly catches on fire or whatever, and everybody's freaking out, and he's like, to hell with it, and he grabs the non-alcoholic wine and chugs it and just starts rage screaming. I thought that was pretty funny, actually. But I mean, the characters themselves were useless and shallow, and I think only Dave towards the very end had anything to say that wasn't supposed to be funny, right? Where he was talking about his concerns about the relationship or something. It was a brief moment, but at least there was that. Even the main romantic interest was nothing but witty banter and annoying stuff up until the poetry, and then they started to get together, and then he was annoying for different reasons. And it was just kind of I started to tune it out, I think. I was all right, well, guys in this movie are going to be idiots, and this is all about pregnancy, so I'm just not going to care. It didn't bother me. I'm not like upset about it.
If you're trying to make a parody of men, I think it can be funny in this context, given the fact that it's supposed to be a specific female struggle dealing with pregnancy. However, there were some like micro interactions that I thought were very problematic and like unfair for both genders. Like, for example, the first scene of the movie where Kate realizes that she's pregnant. So she's peeing on the toilet and her husband comes in. I don't remember why. He barges in and she's like, oh, why don't you knock first? And then he leaves. And then he comes back. He comes back and forth a few times and she feels like he's invading her privacy. And then at the end of the scene, she pees on the stick, realizes she's pregnant, and she calls her husband, and then he's like, doesn't want to come into the bathroom because she's told him to leave so many times. And then she's like, now you won't come into the bathroom, and she's angry. She's giving mixed messages, and he also has zero intuition about her own personal boundaries in her body, and she's angry at him. And I'm like, all of that is bullshit. Like, it's supposed to be a joke about boundaries being violated and him not knowing when it's okay and when it's not okay. And I was like, I don't find that funny at all, personally.
Yeah, that is problematic. The other one was just like very obviously at the end when she's like, I hate my husband. But okay, another way to think about all of this is if we were to imagine that this is just like a film about women's experiences, and like if you were to make like a caricature of like a husband based upon like a partner's complaints, like you would get these weird characters, right? So it's kind of funny that way where it's like Steve is just like unaware, he doesn't know what's going on. It's like that to the extreme. And then Mark, who's like checked out and just not engaged, it's like that to the extreme, you know what I mean? So it's kind of comical in that way, but still.
Again, though, this is the thing we were talking about before where it's like towing the line between, is this thoughtful commentary about the lack of men in child-rearing spaces, you know, as a critique of saying men need to be more involved or they traditionally aren't? Or is it actually just like laughing at some inherent nature of like, well, men don't take care of kids, haha, you know what I mean? That's why like you can't quite tell like if it's a critique, if she's actually just like thinks it's funny that women do all the work, like I don't know, you know.
The other thing I wanted to bring, which is just like, you know, I don't know if it's worth like spending too much time on, but it came up like immediately when Frank and I were talking, which is there's this theme of like violence to the womb, like that they use comically. And like the symbolism around like injury to the womb is just like through the roof. And it's supposed to be funny, but because it happens so frequently, it's actually kind of like, I don't know, it hurts a little to watch. It just feels wrong. So it's like, yeah, so the first example is when she goes over to her friend Meg's house and the kid's running around with a knife, and then that kid just stabs her stomach with the knife, and then nobody's looking, they take it out. And then later that night her belly bumps into the stove and it catches on fire, and then she immediately like face plants and like smashes her stomach against the ground to like try and like put it out. Earlier, when she's at the yoga class, she tries to do this yoga pose and stands a certain way and falls flat on her face, and everybody comes running over. They're concerned because she's landed on the baby. There's like another time too when she just like, I think is ice skating or something, and like she smashes her belly against the wall, and it just kind of felt like gratuitous, you know, or anyway, so.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, I understand why they would want to use it as a motif to be like, she's not actually pregnant, isn't that funny? Like, it points out the fact that she's faking it, but as like imagery and like a theme and an overall concept, it's really sus.
I was looking at it from the aspect of the secret identity trope. And the thing that it made me think of first was Mrs. Doubtfire. There's the scene where he's got the mask and something happens and it flies out the window and gets run over by a truck, right? And then he has to take the pie and shove it in his face. And it's not upsetting because obviously you don't think of your face falling off and being run over by a truck. But it does endanger the secret identity. And I think that's what all of this was for. But because it's like an actual body part that people who are pregnant would have and would have experienced, it's much more visceral, right? And it's like seeing a kid stab a pregnant woman in the stomach is like just an absolutely horrifying thing to do, even if it is meant to be like, oh, she's not pregnant.
Oh my God!
And I think that's where the difference is. Like with those other movies where it's like, oh no, they might be revealed because of this. That's the tension. That's the drama. For this, it's like, oh God, what if she really was pregnant? Like that would be awful. Like she had been stabbed. Like the kid thing really threw me for a loop. But then like her falling and stuff, they did it a lot. It felt like there could have been other ways to do that without making it such a, like a serious kind of a thing. Because if she was actually pregnant, like there's be serious consequences for all those things that happen. So,
all right. So, despite some of the more problematic aspects of this film, or just stupid aspects of this film, were there points at which you sort of laughed despite yourself? Like, did anything like sort of strike you as funny throughout, or was it just like a total snooze fest?
Yeah, my favorite scene was when they were watching the guy ice skate. It was like her and Josh were like on a balcony and they were overlooking, and Josh was like, oh, that fucking up the ice. And I can't remember what she said exactly.
See that guy messing up the ice with his skates?
Hey, stop up the ice, you piece of We can have you killed in minutes!
It was so weird. Like it had no context, and the guy just like it was really funny. It was kind of absurd.
That was good. Yeah, because he's like on the ice, like trying to like make these divots, like being ridiculous, and she just screams at the top of her lungs, like totally unprompted. It seemed like it was so funny. Yeah, I laughed too.
I think I had two scenes that I liked. The first was in the yoga class. They're doing the breathe in, breathe out. They're all farting and stuff. And then they moved on and they're talking about other stuff. And somebody farts. And the teacher's like, we're going to keep those in now.
Let's keep those in now.
And she said it so smoothly that it tickled me. I really like that. The other one was in the butterfly area, right, where she's like, the butterflies are landing on her and she's freaking out. And the little old lady at the door is like, please don't touch. They start screaming at each other. And the lady goes, butterflies attack. And then nothing happened.
I will fight you! I'll you up! Butterflies! Attack!
But it didn't. But it was just hysterical that she got in this shouting match with this like random little old lady over there. I felt that was very New York as well.
My favorite by far was the final scene, which is just so absurd, and it like ends the whole film on like a dark note. And I know we talked about it briefly, but it's just like they're so happy, they're riding the Zamboni into the distance, and all of a sudden they lose control. It sideswipes a bunch of cars. They really lose control, and it flat out just smashes cars and busts through newspaper stands, and then it literally smashes through an outdoor eatery where people are running and screaming, and it destroys all of the tables and chairs, and then they keep driving and they're like, and it was just like so much destruction at the end, and it was just like so unsettling, and like kind of just, it's like a really weird punctuation, but also really funny. So
all right, so let's see how the people reviewed this interesting film. I picked one good review and one bad review, and we'll see which one aligns more closely with how we feel about it. All right, so the good one first. The title is Haven't Laughed Out Loud Like This in a While! ! This movie was hilarious, and my boyfriend, who usually likes other comedians like Bill Burr, who have a more hetero-male-oriented perspective and jokes, also enjoyed. I caught him laughing and secretly smiling quite a bit. Series of emojis. I don't understand why people would say it's bad or give it a low review. It's not cute. They must not have any sense of humor. Should be an average of at least 7 stars in my opinion. Amy Schumer is hilarious and the whole cast works really well together. In fact, I may just go watch it again right now. It is especially funny if you're a woman my age who is 36 and has not had a child yet. Haha, nailed it. This was downvoted 15 times. It got 3 upvotes and downvoted 15 times. I say that because I find it entertaining. I love that she points out that she's 36 and has not had a kid, and that makes her the perfect demographic for this movie. Is that accurate?
Well, this is what I was saying, is I feel like that's kind of like why I give this movie a pass, is simply because even though a lot of the jokes and some of the stuff in it was like not great and it wasn't thoughtful commentary and maybe a little harmful, overall, the package Amy Schumer delivers is women who don't fit within society's perfect boundaries of what it could be, to be a good woman, a good wife. At this age, you have to have kids, you have to be married. And that's exactly what's reflected in this review, is somebody saying, I liked it, I felt heard, I felt seen. And I feel like that even if the movie is not thoughtful at all, there's still like maybe a net positive, simply because just having representation like this is still important in this day and age.
Okay, let's get to the bad review. It was hard to pick just one. I will say the breakdown for ratings, there were a few 10s, a couple 9s, a lot more 6s and 7s, and then the 1s were by far the most reviewed. So that drags us down to like sub 5. It's like 4.8, 4.9 territory. So here's the bad one. The title is unbelievably bad. Kind of gets right to the point. Avoid this movie. It is so bad in every way. Both the storyline, the acting, the characters, the production are just very poor. Both of those things. Together, this is a disaster of a movie that will leave you wishing you could get the time you spent watching it back. Everything in it is so stereotypical, and you'd thought we would have come further than this in 2025. If you are looking for a comedy in this category to put a smile on your face, this is not it. We all need something in our lives that will cheer us up in this world of turmoil, and this movie will do the opposite. If I could give it a 0, I would. That was just a gem. Oh gosh.
I mean, her character is depressing, and the fact that like she goes to this length to like delude herself that she's pregnant, she's so unhappy with her life. But I mean, that's the whole theme.
People definitely empathize more with the bad comments.
All right, so thanks for joining us as we picked apart Kind of Pregnant. It was kind of boring. It was kind of predictable. It was kind of raunchy. It was kind of I don't know. I feel like the jury's out on whether or not this was something she intended to do or it was incidental and just something she would have done in a stand-up routine. So thanks for picking with us, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.